but we'll get going. I am, excuse me, Liza Bernard from the Norwich Bookstore, but obviously I'm hosting from home. And while the bookstore isn't open for browsing yet, we are there every day except Sunday and we're happy to take your orders by phone or email or via our website. And we do porch pickup and shipment and whatever works for you. So we thank you for joining us this evening, and we ask you to keep your video off and your audio mute. And you'll see if you have questions, you may be getting a message from Michael Pryles, who's the wizard who works the tech behind the screen. So as we start going, we recommend that you choose the speaker option and then turn your chat option on. It's going to be a little bit different because we do have screen sharing, so the speakers are along the side. But you can, if you turn the chat option on, you'll be able to see the links to the book, and also later on in the program, you can add your questions and comments. We will be recording this event to post to our website later. And the format this evening is pretty basic. I'm going to do a brief introduction of the book, and then the presentation, and then the last part will be questions via chat. I will jump back on and share your questions and comments with our speakers. So the question was, how do I introduce this beautiful book, Vermont Almanac, which I don't really have to hold up because it's on the screen. The title is actually Vermont Almanac, Stories from and for the Land. First, it's about the people, starting with the three editors we have here this evening. Dave Mance, who's listed as sugar maker and editor. Patrick White, Christmas tree grower and editor. Virginia Barlow, forester and editor. And as you'll see as soon as you open the book, which I don't know if we're going to stop on this page or not, so I'm going to hold up one of them, one spread. There is a whole slew of more than 60 people, some whose names are familiar, such as the poet Sid Lee and the naturalist Mary Holland, and others who you may not have even heard of, who all contributed to the book in a myriad of ways. Then another part of the book is the images that illustrate the book, which you'll see as the program goes along. They're an integral part of this amazing portrait of our state. There are historic and contemporary photographs. You know, don't do too much scrolling. It's making me dizzy.
Okay.
There are historic and contemporary photographs. There are sketches and intricate drawings, and there are paintings. And there are landscapes and buildings and barns and animals and people and map and food. It's amazing. And then there's the writing. There's poetry, there are recipes. The writing is informational, it's observational, there are personal reflections, and there are humorous stories, including the one with Dave and his sap tank. But without any more words, I'm going to stop and let you guys just dive right in.
Well, thank you, Liza. We appreciate it. And thank you to Michael behind the scenes as well. And thank you to the Norwich Bookstore for having us tonight. And thank you all for signing in remotely here to hear about the Vermont Almanac. As Liza mentioned, we're the three editors. There's a fourth member of our team, Amy Pebberty, who's the business manager who keeps the whole ship afloat. And we handle the content end of things. As Liza mentioned, we had more than 60 different Vermonters contribute to this book. This is our the first volume 1 of Vermont Almanac, and we're actually working on volume 2 right now. I'm going to turn it over in a second to Dave Mance to give you a little background on how the project came about, but I'll just say the three of us that are on this Zoom hail from different parts of Vermont. I'm from the Montpelier area. Dave is from southern Vermont in the Shaftesbury area, and Virginia is from the Corinth area. So, and as Liza mentioned, we come from three different sort of areas of the working land in Vermont. I'm a Christmas tree grower, and Dave is a sugar maker. He's in his busy season right now, and Virginia is a forester. So we come from the very essence, I think, of what we're trying to capture in this book, which is people who have a relationship with the land in some way or another. And that was sort of our driving mission behind creating Vermont Almanac, was to, as the subhead says, to tell stories from and for the land. So I'm going to turn it over to Dave Mance, who's maybe give a little background on how this project came together, how we came together as a group, and how the book came about. And then Dave's going to read. We're going to try to do a little reading tonight from the book, a few different types of pieces to give you a sense of the book. But Dave will read some of the essays that are in the book. Each chapter of the book starts with an essay. Virginia is going to, I think, read some from one of the pieces, a history piece. Each chapter, which is organized monthly, and the book is organized monthly. Each chapter also has a history section. And then I'll talk a little bit at the end about the sort of agricultural industries, some of the agricultural industries that we covered in the book, and some of the neat, I guess, things that we learned and the connections between the past agriculture in Vermont in the past and how things are done these days. So I'm going to turn it over here to Dave for again a little background on the project, and then to jump right into some of the essay reading from the book.
Thanks, Pat. Yeah, we really, the concept here is we wanted to capture time, because we wanted to make a yearbook in a way. The whole goal is to produce one of these every year, so you can kind of collect them on your bookshelves. And when you want to know which was the winter where it got really cold, and it was a warm December, and then it got cold in February and late January, and stayed deep cold for the month like it did this year. That'll be a prominent piece of the volume 2. So capture time. The concept was we were going to start in October. We borrowed from the Native American calendar, and the idea that really in the natural world, time starts when things are at their peak physically, the season of harvest. Then from there you progress through the lean months of winter, through the rebirth of spring and summer, till you're back at peak again. So the book starts in October and goes through the following September. Some of the time is literal, where it's measured in months and certain days within that month, and other instances time is more abstract. It's in rural areas like Vermont, time can be a snowstorm. Time is black fly season. It's the garlic harvest. It's hunting seasons. So a lot of the way we're recording time is through that too. We set out to make something useful. We set out to make something historical, something that gave people a sense of what came before them. Set out to make something that was educational. We're a nonprofit. We want people to be inspired to love this land. And we wanted to make something that had good writing in it. And rather than just go on and on, we figured we'd read some excerpts. So I'm going to read a couple essays. This first one was one that I wrote about the month of February. Seems apropos, seeing as it is February. This was February 2020. We were on the road before dawn, C and I, steaming coffee against the greenish light of the dashboard, the truck cab sauna hot. Some gravel-voiced country singer on the radio lamenting that he was too drunk to dream. Winter music, right? A soundtrack for those pre-dawn hours when the world shrunk to a circle of headlights and introspection seems easy. Above us, distant stars suggested a break in the weather, but the road still bore the mark of recent heavy snows. We traveled from pavement to gravel, the houses along the road mostly dark, save for a few dim lights. early risers in contemplation over coffee, or day sleepers shutting down with the waning moon. The faint blue glow of a television here and there, telling stories about warmer places, different lives. A high definition window into the future, showing rural people where the world's going. The gravel road thinned to a trail. The road sand stopped. The path ahead lay white and shining, packed powder wheel ruts outlining a canvas full of boulder tops and undercarriage drags. We accelerated over the unimproved road, which scabbed the mountain for a quarter mile or so before turning sharply and climbing towards the sky. The road sunk into the earth through this first cut, banks on either side worn skyward by hooves and then feet and wagon wheels, then the lumber rigs, just an old sunken road showing rural people where the world has been. A corduroy trail where men drove fur poles into the mud, then a Lombard run, where those great iron beasts hauled tandem log loads into the valleys, chugging, screaming, belching steam and smoke and fire. Now just a Jeep path and us over old tire tracks. What do you think? Last night? Maybe Friday. As the truck climbed into the mountain, the forest seemed to crowd in above us, snow coating each tree branch until they drooped to ground. The tree's white now and spectral through the dark, the glowing limb wood like bleached bones. Brake lights now, a blood red glow. Cats, he asks, throwing the truck into park. We get out. A straight track through twin circles of light. Though the Jeep trail had been packed to ice, the storm's last gasps lie like gauze upon the road. Cold snow, the kind where you can count snowflakes, every 200th one upturned at an angle, catching the light and refracting like crystal. The fresh bobcat track upon that quilt, circular, almost dainty, no claws. We turn back to the truck, open the door to heat, music, light, rumble on towards the dawn. The road crests and carries true across a mountain plateau. Dark structures emerge from the gloaming. Rusted out trailers and tar paper shacks and a stick frame in the foreground. Red paint peeling, choker chains hanging from 4x4 porch posts, log-length firewood and haphazard patterns around the structure. Boys in camp there, a thin scarf of blue smoke rising from a rusty tin straight pipe. Pickups scattered randomly like matchbox cars between trees. Kennels in the truck beds. Men and dogs and dreams of the hunt, of white rabbits who circle through fir glens. Old men on aged mattresses with heads full of white rabbits circling through spruce and balsam fir. Old bay dogs who twitch before the wood stove and dream of circling white rabbits across boreal summits. The pond lies just over that next hill, on that wood road there off to the left. Yes, there's a road there buried beneath that fresh snow. Could this be what Robert Frost meant? See deadpans as he noses the truck up to the road shoulder. He revs the engine, then goes for broke, a violent carom over hard, dirty snow, and then held breath and silence as the truck pushes smoothly through virgin powder. That odd feeling of weightlessness, a feeling like gliding in a catamaran over calm seas. Oh, that was an essay that kind of brings to mind the deep snow that we're experiencing right now. It's one of the joys of this year has been this nice winter weather we've been having. I also kind of started with that one because it's in the context of last year. That was the last month before the coronavirus kind of became the news story. And it's kind of interesting where October, November, December, January, February, a lot of the way that people took those essays were just traditional nature writing and really focusing in on the season or on the month itself and the season it embodies. And then starting in March, you couldn't escape the elephant in the room. So I'm gonna read one more. We're gonna go to the complete other side of the year and go to July. This is an essay by Leith Tonino, who's one of my favorite Vermont writers. He's gonna take us to A mellow afternoon, a lazy July afternoon, a quintessential Lake Champlain afternoon, perfect for bobbing in a kayak, cultivating aimlessness, temporarily forgetting about the dreaded virus and the teetering democracy and the warming climate and the rest. I lower the paddle, stow it across my lap, listen to the drip, drip, drip. The faint breeze nudges me north, along the shore's sweep of cliffs and dangling cedars, around the bulge of Hills Point. Here is a large bay on the Charlotte-Shelburne border, a bay unlike any other, a bay dressed in feathers. Wait, what? Some boaters I've met call double-crested cormorants ratbirds. While I appreciate regional variation and ornithological nomenclature, this nickname is obviously meant to denigrate. So often with humans, when offered too much of a good thing, we become lazy and bored, letting our awe and gratitude diminish until we're filled with apathy, or worse, ill will. Double-crested cormorants are common on Lake Champlain, as rats are common in a sewer, I suppose. Between the size of a mallard and a Canada goose, with a bright yellow-orange throat set against gleaming black plumage, they're physically conspicuous. They're behaviorally conspicuous as well, regularly congregating to feed in mass. It's this kind of dense foraging party that I've discovered, and that I couldn't be more thrilled to have discovered. The breeze, steady, soft, enables a furtive approach. Easing in close, individuals begin to separate out from the great undulating fabric of feathers, the gargantuan buoyant bird quilt. Double-crested cormorants gather in groups exceeding 2,000 on San Francisco Bay, but I've never seen more than a couple hundred at once on Lake Champlain. I divide the scene into a grid, count the birds in a nearby zone, then multiply. Whoa, the rarest of occurrences. Math, sending a tingling zipping up the old spine. At least 800 birds float in front of me, maybe 900 or a grand. There's only one way to get a better estimate, but I don't kid myself that scientific accuracy is the magnet drawing me in. What I'm about to do will be fun, plain and simple. Like all naturalists, I'm an adult intoxicated with a child's curiosity. Sniff and lick, peer and poke. The breeze nudges me closer, 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 and I try not to breathe, try not to move even my lungs. Cormorants with green eyes twist their necks to preen. Cormorants dive, stay under for 10 seconds, stay under for 20 seconds. Cormorants emerge with silvery morsels, toss their heads back and gluttonously gulp. Cormorants, cormorant. That coinage pops into my mind, the goofy verb attempting to capture this presence, this power, these guttural croaks and gentle rustlings. 5, 4, 3 feet away. Finally, a bird on the edge reacts, rearing up with quick, slapping wing beats, stretching forward, elongating, transforming into a dark arrow shot south. Sharp beak, fletched tail. The bird beside it follows, and the next bird, and the next. As the leader flies, practically skimming the bay's riffled surface, it pulls a thread and the quilt slowly, smoothly unravels into a single file line. For as long as I can remember, there's been this part of me that doesn't think, but feels. It doesn't know, but boy, does it ever know. Sadly, this is the same part of me that routinely crumbles beneath the crushing weight of confusion and sorrow, the relentless ugh and ah of 21st century existence. Shit is real these days, really real. The dreaded virus, the teetering democracy, the warming climate, the rest. But cormorants, a quilt of them unraveling, disappearing around the bulge of Hills Point, knitting together again on some bay beyond the reach of a puny human's vision. That's real too. And that is here. That is now. That is this. And this is July. Height of the breeding season on Lake Champlain, home of the glorious ratbird. Again, that was Leaf Danino. That was our July essay. And as I said, that's capturing time. So, to you, Jenny.
All right. Well, let's see. One of the other monthly things we do is sort of a natural history couple of pages. They're often short little tidbits about things that we've seen or other people have seen. And I'm interested in ferns, so I'm going to read you about ferns. But I was reminded because in the nature notes I also wrote about ferns, especially one called the intermediate wood fern, which is a very common fern. And I learned at some point that in the winter they all flop on the ground, and I thought that was a little bit pathetic. But it turns out that these big ferns that are so upright and beautiful in the summer, they have a hinge at the base of each of their fronds. And when it gets cold, the ferns flop down on the ground. They can keep photosynthesizing, and they can keep sending the fruits of the photosynthesis back to the plant. So you think this thing looks so pathetic, but it's a really good survival strategy. And these ferns must have good survival strategies because the story I'm going to read to you is about the Ackert Fern Empire in Danby. And it's written by a Chick Ackert, who's the grandson of the man who started this. And it's Dave scared up this story from the Danby Mount Tabor Historical Society. But can you imagine something like 50 million ferns were exported in the early part of the 1900s, or the 1900s, just from 4 towns. And well, you'll see. I'll start reading it. But the ferns referred to, they call them fancy ferns, but they're this same intermediate wood fern. So this is by Chick Ackert. In the early 1900s, my grandfather, Peter Ackert, and his wife Sarah started a business to supply fancy ferns to florists, hotels, and fish markets all over the United States, and this continued for several generations. The business needed millions upon millions of fancy ferns every year to satisfy the general public's fascination. These ferns only grew in the wild and couldn't be raised like vegetables. This was one of the few businesses that prospered during the Great Depression. Mort, now he's one of Peter and Sarah's 12 children. And he's an uncle of the author of the story. Mort had the presence and ability to convince the powers that ruled this domain to allow the many large, starving families he employed to gather ferns on their land. He also built a large cold storage warehouse to maintain these very fragile ferns at a constant temperature of 33 degrees. Danby became the central area. Then Merle, who's nicknamed Zib, that's the author's father, annually set up in the Chittenden area. Arthur, he had another nickname, Dodd, Ackert did the same for his part of the business in Randolph. One must remember that fern picking was hard and demanding because of the bugs and the heat of summer. It was piecework paid by the bunch. So the original workforce was the family and extended family and their friends. This Depression-era business took off like gangbusters. Picking areas were cherished, and there were a lot of unwritten rules, like don't never ever go into someone else's area. There was plenty of area all over the Green Mountains, so this wasn't much of a problem. And most pickers did quite well for the times. People today wouldn't believe what so many did for so little pay, but back then it was a minor miracle. Get up early, go into your local mountain, apply what you had been taught, work hard, bring your packs of ferns into a fern camp, and walk out that day with your earnings in your hand. That was the magic of it all. It's also difficult for people to grasp just how many, for so many seasons, found this a way of life. Each summer, after school was out, Merle, that's Zib, would set up quarters in the old Chittenden Hotel. Fern pickers had to build themselves 1 or 2 pack boards 2 feet wide, 3 feet high, with shoulder straps and rope to tie down the ferns to be packed out of the woods after picking. 5,000 ferns per pack, 200 bunches, was considered a reasonable load. I have carried out 10,000 in one pack, but that's how I and many others literally ruined our backs. But of course, we all bragged and loved being in the great outdoors, at least on the good days. My dad always went in for 10,000 ferns every day, rain or shine. The best figure, bragged my uncle Robert. His name was Toots. It's really funny. These people had 12 children. You'd think 12 names would be enough to remember, but each seemed to have these weird nicknames. So they had to remember 24 names. But my uncle Robert, Toots, was the most. He had 27,000. But Dad said he had several of the girls helping him while he bunched them. My brother Johnny claimed 17,000, and the best I ever did was 14,000. No fern picker ever got rich, but I never knew one to starve either. When the season started, the demand was not great, so the price always started low, 40 cents per thousand. That's right, year after year, 25 ferns to the bunch, 40 bunches to the 1,000. Pickers just can't grab handfuls of ferns and pack them onto a packboard and bring them out and get paid. Oh no. What you did was find a big patch of ferns in an accessible area. Pick them 1, 2, maybe 3 at a time. Place them face up, one at a time atop each other, until you have 25 face up at one time atop each other until, excuse me, I'm screwing it up. Each fern being 15 inches tall, not counting the 5 to 6 inch butt, which he calls the handle. Then rub all the feathery fern parts off the butt. Grab the very sharp knife you have dangling from string from your belt and cut the ends of the butts clean. Then take up the end of the fern twine dangling from your pocket and put twine through the end of the butt. Make 3 to 5 turns around the butt, ending by, again, pulling string through the butt. Break off the twine and eureka. One bunch, 1/40th of 1,000, 1 cent at 40 cents per thousand. But don't worry, by season's end, the price will be up to 3 cents per bunch, $1.20 per thousand, although less for bug-eaten or damaged ferns, and fancy fern is very fragile. For us Ackerts, that was just the beginning of our second half of the day. After we brought in the ferns, we had to pack them in moss-lined 3.5 by 3.5 by 1 foot fern boxes in preparation for trucking to the Danby storage. Often at night, George Stone would ride up with Art White and pick up the ferns. Sometimes John Francis, a son of Dad's good friend Royce Francis, would play his guitar and sing real late. He was good, even at age 79. And a friend of mine just told me that in Danby, the fern warehouse is still there. It's now an antique shop, but the owners of the antique shop are very proud of the fact that it once had 50 million ferns in it, or thereabouts. So that's the history page for one of the months.
Thank you, Virginia. Well, I hopefully people have gotten a sense now of a little bit of the types of different content in this book. It's 288 pages. We probably should have mentioned that early on. We didn't really know when we began this project how long of a book it would be, and we probably could have gone longer than that, but we at 288 pages, again, it's divided by chapter, monthly chapters, and there's the essay, the type of essay that Dave read. There's weather. We had meteorologist Roger Hill sort of document each month's weather for us. There's the nature notes that Virginia mentioned, who she is largely responsible for. And if you have followed Virginia's nature writing over the years, you'll know what a treasure those nature notes are. There's the type of history piece that she just read, and then a couple other things, but I'd say one of the main components in each chapter is what we called an industry, which is just sort of a segment of agriculture in Vermont. Some that are sort of familiar to people: dairy and sugaring, There's the forest industry, and some that were maybe less or more recent, the compost industry or the hemp industry. So each month has a theme to it, an agricultural theme, I guess. And obviously every one of those themes is different. We tried in each month to provide an overview of that industry in Vermont to give readers a sense of what that particular industry is like. Apples is one. What type of apples are growers in Vermont growing? Where are the apples going? They're going to pick your own, they're going to wholesale sales, they're going to cider makers, hard cider makers. We profile a particular grower in each chapter, someone who's actually farming, producing, growing, sort of take a close look at their operation. And I think one of the things I'm going to talk about here tonight is a theme that we noticed, partly intentionally, that we set out to explore, and partly it just came through, which is sort of what these industries, what agriculture is like today in Vermont. And often it's different than it was 100 years ago, even if that particular industry has been around for a while. The way people are doing things has completely changed. So I'm going to talk a little bit about a couple of those quickly. The first one I'm going to talk about is a farmer named Brian Leach in the Paulet area, and this is a piece that Dave Mance wrote. So Brian Leach is running a beef farm, and I think the way he's doing it, he's an engineer by education, grew up on a dairy farm, went to college for engineering, and sort of has taken that engineering approach to the way he set his farm up, which runs completely different than someone raising beef cows might have run it in decades past. So I'm going to start midway through this particular section. Leach, 32, grew up on a Paulet dairy farm that his father and older brother still run. Today, he lives down the road from the home farm and stewards 80 head of beef. Part of this diversification is practical. The river bottom cropland grows corn for the cows, whereas the unused hillside pastures are best suited for grazing. This gave him a niche. Raising beef, which is less labor intensive than dairy, also allows him to work in his shop. He has a mechanical engineering degree from UVM, both as a means of keeping the farm going and as an occupation that brings in steady money. Just quickly as an aside, that's something that we heard a lot from farmers that we talked to, that many of them have off-farm income or sideline jobs to help make their agricultural project work. It's hard to say whether he's a mechanic, an engineer, or a farmer, which is the point. In the old days, before specialization, every farm was a diversified endeavor. As we drive a buggy up the hillside toward the cows, he shows me the land, lovely layered hillsides framed by Haystack Mountain to the north and Scott Mountain to the west. The meadowy herself wending along the valley like a green ribbon. And he shows me the cows, Holstein, Angus, Wagyu crosses. The Holstein, a dairy breed, because that's what he had to start with. The Angus, a traditional beef breed to bring muscle. The Wagyu, a specialized high-end beef breed with intensive marbling to give the meat a special touch. But really, he's showing me his system. That's what he wants to talk about. To pasture right, you need to match the number of animals to the number of acres. Too many animals and you'll get an ecologically damaged meadow that looks like a putting green. Too few animals and you'll get a hillside full of inedible weeds. And you need a method that distributes the cows grazing. Using portable electric fences, Leach creates temporary paddocks and moves the cows to fresh grass every day. He moves the watering trough too. If your watering system is stationary, the cows beat highways to it and you lose productive land. He's got a water line that runs along the bottom of the pasture, with headers and quick connect valves every 200 feet. His trough is on skids and has a reinforced float system. The cow's combination of size and curiosity is unbelievably destructive, he said, while attaching a steel guard plate to the intake. It took him years to figure the system out and get it right. But now, when it's right, it means he's got less than an hour into the cows during the growing season and the rest of the day to be productive somewhere else. Watching the cows graze, he said, they're mowing, feeding themselves, and spreading manure on the fields. On a dairy farm, those are 3 different jobs that a farmer has to do. This freeing up of a farmer's time goes hand in hand with improved animal welfare. Dairy farms are constantly dealing with foot problems. Any human who works at a stationary job on hard floors can relate. But on pasture, this is not an issue. I only handle the steers maybe 2 or 3 times in their lives, he said. It's kind of a Native American model, like when they followed the buffalo herds. I only exist in the animal's periphery. So I think, again, it's sort of a neat story about a young farmer who's created a system where the cows are doing a lot of the work and they're healthier for it. And it frees up his time to work on other aspects of the farm or completely different projects that help bring in money to make the agricultural part of his life and his family's life possible. I think that's sort of a typical, it's a great example of a typical story that we heard about different ways that people are doing things. Here's a slightly different example. This was an article I wrote about a hemp farm in the Northeast Kingdom. This is a family, the husband, well, I'll read that part, but it's basically, obviously hemp is a relatively new endeavor, agricultural endeavor in Vermont. And this farm family is growing only on 1 acre. It's not a large acre endeavor. It's a 1 acre field of hemp plants, and they make a product themselves. They do the processing, they make a product and sell the product themselves. So it's a sort of completely integrated endeavor for them. But as you'll see, it's a completely different way of life than this particular farm family was used to in that area. Cam Devereaux grew up on a dairy farm in Barton, back when there were 11 other farms just on that same road. There are none now, a sign of what happened to the dairy industry over the past 3 or 4 decades. Like many, Devereaux looked for other ways to make a living. For him, that meant a 30-year career as a welder and heavy equipment mechanic on big construction jobs, almost all of them out of state. So he was always gone in the summer, said his wife, Karen Devereaux. And we have 2 kids, so the boys and I were here. Karen works as a school teacher. And when she came home from school one day back in 2017, Cam asked her, did you know that you can grow hemp in Vermont and it's legal? And that they're finding out that it's really healthy for people? Okay, but how does that apply to us, Karen asked. Little did she know at the time that hemp would take the family on what she calls a roller coaster ride for the next 3 years. So this is a farmer who grew up on a dairy farm in this particular town, and the dairy farms are all gone. And he had to leave the state for work. He's found a niche in agriculture that's allowed him to come back to the state and work with his family and work on the land. And sort of another neat story. And I'll before we make time for questions, I'm just going to cite one more sort of example. I think that gives a flavor of some of the profiles in the book. This is another piece that Dave Mance wrote about haying in the 21st century. Haying, probably one of the oldest forms of agriculture in the state. The early settlers needed to do it to feed their livestock. But the way it was done then versus the way it's done now is completely different. And not just in terms of the equipment used, but it's oftentimes, and in the case of this particular hay farmer, it's not the farmer who owns the land themselves that's doing, but it's a specialized niche. This person has started a business. He was I think a computer tech engineer by trade who moved to Vermont and got into hay farming. So farms hire him to come in and hay for them. This is Sean Shanny. Sean Shanny's operation will hay around 330 acres this year. A good chunk of this land they took over when Henry Strohmeyer passed away. Henry was the traditional dairy farmer of Vermont legend, big with a gregarious personality. I don't know how many hundred head he milked, but his farm's footprint covered 3 or 4 towns. But his was a 20th century model. I don't have to tell you how hard it has been for dairy farmers of late. And so in this void comes three dozing dogs with a 21st century model. 3 dozing dogs is Sean Shanny's haying business. Part of this modern model relies on a source of income that comes from off the farm. Shanny made some money in tech and then turned to farming. Others keep their footprint small and run sideline businesses that subsidize their farming. Another part of the 21st century model involves keeping land costs negligible. While good river bottom hayland might still bring $100 an acre in rental fees, Shanny pays nothing for the 12 or more parcels that he cuts. In some cases, the landowners simply want to see their fallow land made productive. They're not making money, but they're eliminating the expense of brush hogging and getting the pride of contributing to the agricultural economy. In some cases, Shanny's active farming makes their parcel eligible for a tax break through current use, which is their incentive. In some cases, the pitch is simply that he'll do right by the land. I'm usually dealing with fields that started out in terrible shape, he tells me, both structurally and in terms of soil health. 20th century corn growing practices featured liberal use of herbicides and synthetic fertilizers, not to mention the fact that a crop of corn is a nutrient vacuum. Hay is less taxing than corn, and Shanny's practices involve cover cropping to rebuild soil rather than, or at least in addition to, fertilizing. And the 21st century model often means being specialized. Much of the work that 3 dozing dogs does is custom baling, custom rock picking, custom planting and harvesting. A modern combine can cost $500,000 and you use it for 12 weeks, said Shanny. So if you're a farmer, why buy and add to your debt load when you can just sub the work out to a specialized contractor like him? Again, somebody with not an agricultural background at all, who's found a niche, and it's helping the farms out. They're not having to invest in the huge expensive equipment that's needed, and he's specialized and can provide that service. So those are, again, 3 just different examples of sort of the different segments or industries of agriculture that we cover in the book. And we're not doing justice to the full scope, I think, of the content in the book. There's a lot of sort of neat, fun, offbeat tips, tricks, stories that sort of weave throughout the pages. Hopefully we've covered at least a little bit of that tonight. I think Liza mentioned that there's some time for questions, and we'd love to hear any questions you have. We'll try our best to answer. But again, we appreciate you listening and learning a little more about Vermont Almanac tonight.
Oh, thank you very much. And indeed, there are questions. Some of them are from me and some of them are from other people.
Okay.
And the first one actually is from a couple of different places, and that is how you came up with your selections of history versus nature versus poetry, how you balanced out each chapter, what your parameters were. And the sort of other half of that is how much of the book was created specifically for the book, artwork wise, and original poetry versus historical things that you picked from archives and historical societies. So basically it has to do with how you chose the material for the book.
The Dave question.
Yeah, I think it's hard to, it's going to be hard to give a satisfying answer because the biggest thing was we were making it up as we went along. So, part of kind of one of the backstories, we originally envisioned it. So imagine we started working on this last January. So we were already a couple months behind that we kind of had to, build in the past tense. And our original plan is that we were going to have a timeline that literally stuck. It had, the months were separated into the days. So it would be like April 6th would be a story, and then April 10th would be a story, and throughout the year. And it took us several months to realize that was going to just be impossible to do, because we were going to run out of time and we needed to have a 2-month printing window at the end of the year, and it was going to screw the whole model up. So we went back to square one. So it was kind of this frantic thing of pulling together this model that would work. And the template that eventually fell into place was essay, weather, nature notes, history, a look back in industry. And so once we had that pegged, it was easy to reach out to people and say, okay, here's a little better idea of what we need. But then as far as the stuff that was real time and is versus more general things like a poem that was not written in 2020, like I'm thinking of Leland Kinsey, the late Leland Kinsey, who just, was just a poet we all admire, just kind of the conscience of rural Vermont. Well, we needed to have that in. So there's a bit of a random feel to it too, which I kind of like in the finished product, where it kind of feels a little raw and it feels a little ragged, but I like it. It kind of feels of this place that way. I think is once the model is established now, volume 2 is going to go smoother. Volume 3, even more so. But I kind of like when I can look back on this and there's an element of randomness, which I think is kind of cool. I don't know if that answered your question at all, but it was.
Yeah, and the beautiful paintings that start each month, were they were created for the book, I assume?
Oh, no, not at all. No, that was
Oh.
something Nick DeFries has been painting the same scene from his studio window for, I don't know, 20 or 25 years. And he let us use them. But no, they were all done before. And some of the writing was done before, but not, I don't know what the percentage is.
Yeah, I don't know either, but
Yeah.
as we mentioned, we had 60 some people who contributed, and we had this plan for the Vermont Almanac, but we had nothing to show people. So it's a testament to the many people who contributed that we contacted people, some that we knew and some that we didn't know, because they had a particular area of expertise. And we said, could you write us something about this? And we don't have a huge budget, and here's what we're trying to do. And the response was terrific from people. We couldn't have done it without all the contributors. Some of the things that we read tonight were from our own writing in our own words, but a huge part of the book really is the voice of so many different people. That's the part, I think one of the things that I'm proudest of is looking through those contributor pages and seeing how many different voices, whether it's a scientist, a farmer, an actual quote unquote writer who writes, as a profession. It's a real mix of different voices, but who all share this relationship with the land. It's really neat to see it come together, I think. At one section of the book we haven't touched on is called At Home. And that's sort of I don't know, tips or tricks. And sometimes it boils down the industry that we talked about, whether it's compost or apples, to to the homeowner level or the homesteading level. So we sort of give tips if you want to compost at home, if you want to prune your own apple trees, that sort of thing. That's sort of the how-to part of the book, I guess, and that's something we hadn't touched on earlier this evening.
Now that,
One other thing that the book, as many people have remarked, does not have an index, and I can't find things in it myself. And I know that's a bit of a problem, but online we do have a really nice index made by Maplewood Indexing that's available as a PDF. So you can just look at it or print your own index in case you're looking for something and can't find it.
will there be an index in volume 2?
We might just keep it online because it's hard to do everything on time. I don't know.
Yeah.
We'll see. I can't imagine being that far ahead, but it's possible.
So now that you've got your format all together and you've got this pool of incredibly creative people, will you be sticking with the same thing, or will you be expanding the pool and tweaking your sort of layout?
I
Yeah.
think it's going to be, the template is going to stay roughly the same. Mostly because it enables us to communicate well with contributors about exactly what we're looking for. But in volume 2, we really want to we want more voices. There are many people that we are excited about working with again. And we have some good stuff in the works, but we really, we envision this thing. We want to get into every corner of Vermont, and we want to, I'd love to have, 120 different voices in this next one coming up. So we want to keep getting new contributors. We want to keep getting new story ideas, and we want to be also creatively restless too with the model. So it'll be, the template will be similar in volume 2, but we want to make it feel, like its own document too, like its own thing.
I can
Yeah.
imagine that you would get a flood of people wanting to participate now they see how gorgeous the finished product is. It's
Thank you. Yes,
really quite something.
we feel
Yeah.
better when we're able to show people and say, here's what we're doing. Would you like to contribute, or is there, would you be willing to share your expertise in this area? And yeah, as Dave said, we're definitely looking to add to the new voices to the mix. There'll be a couple of the industries, quote unquote industries, that'll stay the same, sort of the key ones in Vermont, like the dairy and the sugaring, but others will change. We're looking at things like grains in volume 2 and mushrooms. It's going to be a different mix of topics covered. Yeah, it's to answer your question, it's much easier, Liza, when we have something to show people. And we've certainly been heartened by the response that we've had. We actually sold out of our first printing and printed a second printing, and that's what we're distributing now. And thanks to bookstores like Norwich and people buying online, it's the word is getting out, and we've got plenty of books now. So anybody that's interested, we'd like to get it in their hands.
So somebody asked it commented that you didn't put 2020 on the cover of this one. Is there thinking behind that, if it's going to be an annual?
We actually, intentionally, we had 2020 on there during the early design phases, and we got to thinking about the confusion. It's because we're publishing right at the end of the year, and as Dave mentioned, that each volume will run October to September. So this book actually starts in October of 2019 and runs through September of 2020, and that will always be the case. That the years are sort of staggered. Inside in the table of contents, we lay out what each, December 2019, February 2020. But we figured for simplicity's sake on the cover, we'll stick to volume number.
That makes sense. That makes a lot of sense. And can you say a little bit about the sponsor pages that are at the end of each chapter?
Yeah, so these were, we had, I forget the number, but we literally started this project with no money. We borrowed some money from my brother for, with the understanding that we'd pay him back in 3 years. So it was, the sponsors were tremendously helpful in allowing this thing to actually come to life. They were like-minded people who bought into this idea. We had no product to show them. We told them what we were doing, and they signed up to support us. And also the contributors, to a person, I think we asked, there was one person who declined, to be a part of it, and the rest, we just basically said, we don't, here's our idea. We don't really have, we're making it up as we go along. We have next to no budget. You want in? And they pretty much said, yep, we do. So it was this just great affirming and just great illustration of Vermont just being, this cool, creative community, and so much goodwill and out there, and really the way everybody supports each other is it's been one of the silver linings and what's been a tough year for everybody.
Mhm.
I think we touched on this quickly earlier, but we created this as a nonprofit organization. It's called For the Land Publishing. And it's that nonprofit that puts out the Vermont Almanac. And yeah, it's the contributions from the contributors, as well as from early subscribers who made a point, so many of them, to give above and beyond the $30 cost of the product to help, make sure it would be possible. And the early sponsors who we went to with nothing to show. And as Dave said, it's very cool to see what, and sort of what we envisioned, what we hoped for, that there would be such support for rural Vermont, for working lands, for people doing right by the land in this state, that there would be an interest in hearing those stories and supporting it. It's been very cool to see that all come together.
I think that's a really creative solution to funding. I think it's very tastefully done. That's not the right word, but it's very understated, which is as a reader, it's appreciated. So
Thank you. Yeah, we intentionally limited the number of pages of sponsorships to just this one spread, I guess, in each chapter.
Yeah.
We intentionally made them, we didn't want ads, we wanted them to, try to tell a little story too, which the companies and the people were receptive to too. They like that idea.
Yeah, it fits with the other stories. They fit with the other
That's-
stories.
We hope so, right. Mhm.
So do you have any other final comments, words you'd like to put out there for the listeners?
We just, again, thank you, Eliza and the Norwich Bookstore, for putting on this event, and thank you to everyone who joined. Hopefully we've piqued your interest a little bit in Vermont Almanac. As Liza mentioned, you can order directly through them. We have a website, vermontalmanac.org, and we're excitedly working on volume 2 as we speak. That won't be out until the end of this year, late November timeframe of this year. So we hope that people might be able to get a copy of volume 1 and follow along through the course of the year. I've heard so many people say I'm sort of following you guys month by month. They read the February section right now and get a sense of what's going on in nature in Vermont right now, what agricultural endeavors are happening in Vermont right now, what the past was like, this time of year, 100 or 200 years ago. I think it's kind of a cool way to pass, to chronicle the year, sort of following chapter by chapter.
It is.
Yeah, I guess the thing I'd throw out there too to people who have joined us is if you've got ideas, get in touch. We often have people who sheepishly come up and say, well, I kind of have an idea. I don't know if it's very good, or I don't know if you're interested in it. And I'm like, no, let's hear it. Absolutely, we're interested in it. You know, we want this, you know, this is everybody's book. This is, you know, the
And-
more ideas, the more voices, the better. So be in touch.
And we're easy to contact. It's just Virginia, Dave, or Patrick at vermontalmanac.org.
That's right. And we're the editorial team. You're seeing us all here. There's no gigantic world headquarters anywhere else. This is us.
Well, there is our
That's it.
business manager, Amy.
That's right. Yeah.
We would not be here without Amy.
No, we would not.
Well, I have to say that you set your bar for an annual almanac. You set the first bar pretty high. So I look forward to spending more time with this book, because I have to say I have not read it cover to cover. I dip in, and I look forward to volume 2, and best of luck getting it together. And I want to thank everybody for joining us tonight, and I hope you can join us for another event. You can find links to the book. It'll come back up in chat, and also they're on our website, or you can just call or email us. We're there. And we encourage you to sign up for our newsletter and check out past videos. This video will be posted to the website. It's the lower right-hand corner of our main page. And you can see other events you might have missed. And we do truly appreciate your support of the Norwich Bookstore. So thanks, everybody, and have a good evening and a wonderful spring that's coming soon and quickly.
We hope.
We're ready.
That's right.
We are ready. This is true. So thank you, everybody. And the links are in chat. And we look forward to seeing you soon.
Thank you, Liza. Thank you, everyone.
Good night.
Thank
Good
you
night.
very much.